guys, Sprintman117. Welcome back to the channel on phase 2 of my ultimate Pelican Dropship MOC. Phase 2 consists of the cockpit and the armory. We'll get onto that shortly, but first of all I just wanted to go over a few questions I had on phase 1 of the video, which was the troop bay. First off, a few people mentioned about the holes left on the side where the seating sections are removed. These will be covered up, there'll be panelling along there once the engine assemblies for the wings and the roof structure is all complete. I can't do that yet until I know where everything's going to be, but they will definitely be all covered up and they'll be easily removed by those 4 studs surrounding that hole. Another question a couple of people commented on was the scale, about whether it was too big or not. Now, this is a bit of a tricky one because when I started doing this, I wanted to make it minifig scale. So I started off by looking at the dimensions of the actual in-game model, and it states on pretty much anywhere that you can find on the internet, the Pelican in-game is 30 meters long. Now the way I worked this out was I took one of the Marines, one of the minifig Marines, and averaged his height up at 1.8 meters, which is 5'10". Now, if you work that out, it works out that the model itself should be about 90 centimeters long. So it is going to be a pretty big model with a pretty large wingspan. You can also find on the internet some specifications for the internal dimensions of the troop bay as well. The information I found states that the overall interior length of the troop bay is 6.19 meters or 20 feet, just over 20 feet in fact, and the width should be 4.64 meters or 15 feet in width, and height wise it should be 3.23 meters or 10 foot 6. So it is a very large space. So by no means is it a small space like we see on the original Pelicans that Mega have produced. Another thing I do want to say is that this is never going to be an exact scale, so I have had to compromise in some areas just to simply make it work, get enough seats in, make the doors work and so on. So it's not exact, but it is pretty close to those dimensions if I work on the basis that the minifigs are 5'10" in height. But to be honest with you, that's just a figure that I plucked out of the air, so there is no exact scale. The final thing I wanted to discuss just before we get onto the cockpit and the armory was, in the last video I mentioned I was unsure as to the purpose of the middle room between the troop bay and the cockpit. I've since been told in the comments section, so thank you for that, that this is an airlock, which does make sense, but an airlock was a bit boring because generally it was just an empty room, so I've decided to go for airlock / armory anyway, just to make the MOC a bit more interesting. So with all that said, let's take a look at the cockpit. Now, I've got to be honest here from the get-go, this was way harder than I thought it was going to be. It wasn't helped by the fact that I wanted to have interior space on this cockpit, and I'm limited by what pieces I have, although I have got a vast collection of green pieces to build this from. I used way more than I thought I was going to on this bit, and unlike with Lego, you can't just go online and buy the pieces you need. You can only get them from buying either brand new sets or second-hand sets. And some pieces that you need, like various slopes and tile pieces, they're so limited in some of the sets. You really are governed by what you've got, so you can't always build the way you want to. So you've got to do what you can do with what you've got, unfortunately. So that said, I'm pretty happy with the overall shape I managed to achieve, but it was really challenging. I've had to use all sorts of pivots and plates and angle pieces and everything to get the overall shape of the nose of the Pelican. One big thing for me was trying to get plastic in for the windows, because you're really limited with the amount of plastic clear pieces that Mega have produced for their mainstream commercial sets. So I looked at it, and all I could come up with in the end was using window pieces from the countdown sets for the actual control tower. So the top 3 sections are the 3 sections you use on a countdown set, and then the lower section of the window is just another centerpiece from another countdown set. Once I decided to use those pieces, trying to get green around them was an absolute nightmare. So as you can see, I've got all sorts of pivot pieces that flap up and down and so on, just to get the overall shape. Once I decided on how to build the window / roof structure, I then had to decide how I was going to make it removable, because as I mentioned earlier, I wanted to be able to access the cockpit and I wanted a detailed interior which was one of my must-haves when I was discussing my phase 1 video about the troop bay. I have to be able to access it for filming and also play factor as well. Just being able to get in and out of there is really important to me. So the best way I decided to come up with it was to just hinge it at the front like this. So as you can see, you can just hinge up the entire roof section and then easily remove it as and when you need. With the canopy removed, you can see I've managed to create quite a spacious cockpit in there. This was a really important area for me because, as I mentioned in phase 1 video, the inspiration for this Pelican was the Halo 6 Infinite trailer, and that trailer starts off with the pilot in the cockpit, and it's clearly a side-by-side seating affair in the cockpit of that trailer, and it's quite a spacious cockpit as well. And before he has to rush off into the troop bay for an emergency, you see him spending a bit of time in this cockpit. So for me, it was important to try and make it at least resemble as much as I could the cockpit from that trailer. For me, one feature that I really wanted to have was the rotating sliding seats, but I wasn't really sure how I was going to go about doing that, so I played around with it, tried some different things, and eventually came up with this system here where the seats are able, both of them, to slide backwards and forwards, and then once they've slid back, you can rotate them fully so the pilot can exit the seat, which is very similar to how the pilot exits his seat before he rushes off into the troop bay in that trailer. He just pushes back off the counter, spins the chair around, and then off he goes. So pretty pleased with the way this has worked out. And again, it's things like this that limit or control the size and scale of the ship, because you can't do these things if you don't have enough room to insert the pieces that make these mechanisms work. I decided to take a few liberties with the rest of the cockpit area, like I decided to put in this little viewfinder for the co-pilot as some sort of targeting display. I just thought that was fun, a little fold down unit there. And then at the back you can see there's a figure working at some kind of station with some levers that he can pull up and down, and there's a few displays there as well. And then on the other side there's just some cabinetry just to fill out the space really. Moving on to the armory, I realised very early on that once I got this thing all sandwiched together, it was going to be difficult to impossible to access that very small room. So I decided early on to incorporate some sort of function to allow me to separate the front of the ship to the troop bay of the ship. Because as you can see, as you open the doors here, it looks okay, but you can't really get your hands in there to do anything, and obviously that really restricts what you can use that room for, let alone if you ever wanted to shoot any scenes in there. You can also see here, you can see down from above, but again you can really see how tight the access would be to get in there and do anything. With this being the case, I felt I had no option but to come up with a way to be able to separate the front of the Pelican to the main body of the Pelican. So I've incorporated some studs into the main fuselage of the troop bay and some holes into the cockpit area. These plates are just temporary, just to lock it into place, but the permanent plates will obviously do the same job once I've designed those side covers. Once you've popped those two off, you can then just pull on the front of the cockpit like this, and basically it just slides straight off, and then that gives you full access into the armory. Taking a closer look at the armory, you can see the space above it. I've spent a bit of time putting various ducting in there and so on just to make it look a bit more realistic. I've also spent some time making the gun racks. You can see I've got a whole load of assault rifles on the left, and then I've got shotguns on the back wall. We've got a Spartan laser above, 2 sniper rifles above the assault rifles, and then over on the right we've got a flamethrower. We've got some battle rifles on the back wall, and then we've got, I think there's saws possibly on the right hand side. We've got some radio units, some backpacks, some handguns and some Uzis. So plenty of space to store lots of guns, and of course they're completely interchangeable, so you can change them as and when you feel like it. Removing the cockpit segment of the Pelican also allows you to get some good views of the doorway going through into the troop bay. As you can see, you can open these doors, so you've seen them open from the other side. This is them opening from the armory, so you get to see through a different perspective, which is nice. Also, if we bring back the cockpit, you can see I've actually done the fourth wall of the armory, so we've got a few additional items placed on these walls. I've just got a blank cabinet on the right hand side with a flamethrower, and then on the left hand side I've put in a rocket launcher and somewhere for the guys to hang their helmets when they're not wearing them. I just wanted to come back and show you the cockpit one more time before we finalise the video, because I am particularly pleased with this area. I just love the way these seats can spin around and slide back, and it's passed the child test too. My 8-year-old daughter spent about 20 minutes playing with it and she absolutely loved it. So it's definitely passed the fun factor test, which is really important because that's what it's all about, having fun and just building things. So I'm really pleased that she likes it. Hopefully you guys like it too, and that pretty much finishes off this phase of the build. If you have any questions on anything I've done here or the build in itself, feel free to leave a question in the comments section below and I'll do my best to answer that in the next video. If there's anything you think I've missed on these videos, by all means you can make a suggestion on that too, and I'll try to include that in the next video too. In respect to the next video, I do need to go through a few boxes and sort a few more pieces out before I can continue to build. So far I've scavenged 5 Rhino sets, 3 Pelican Gunship sets, 3 wraith sets, 3 countdown sets, and just a load of random bits that are in my bits and pieces box. So it's really chewing through the sets. I do have some more, but I've got to go through my collection to find out what's where and sort it all out. So there may be a bit of delay before the next video, but I'll be sure to do some other videos in the meantime. I have been trying to get around to do phase 2 of the Ultimate Assault on High Ground MOC, so hopefully that will be my next video and maybe get that out for you shortly. As always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and we'll see you next time.